Shalom, and welcome to Psychology of the Parsha for Parshat Ki Tisa. Ki Tisa begins with the mitzvah of a half shekel, and then segues into the mitzvah of making the wash basin. In chapter 30, verse 17, Hashem says to Moshe, "V'asita kiyor nechoshet." You should make the kiyor out of copper. And this is intended for Aaron and his sons, and of course perpetually all future Kohanim, to wash their hands, quote, as they enter the tent of meeting, or if they come to do service to Hashem. And they shall not die. That means that this is imperative. They need to use the water from this wash basin in order to purify their hands and feet and to be able to enter the holies, to be able to enter to do the service, the holy service of Hashem. Now it's very interesting that we spent 2 weeks learning about all the various details of the construction and the artifacts of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, the Bet HaMikdash, and about all the garments, everything that was necessary for service. Only after it fully completes all of that, and it even tells us about the half shekel, which contributed to the sockets. The silver of it was used for the sockets to hold up the walls of the Mishkan. Only now does God tell us about this. So it seems to give off the impression that this was of lesser importance, of lesser value, compared to all the other artifacts in the Holy Temple. Furthermore, if you notice, everything else was not only covered in gold, but some of it was actually made out of pure gold. This is the only exception. This is made out of copper. Why? What is it about the copper? The sages tell us, quote, although this was made out of copper and everything else was made out of gold, or had gold plating, there was nothing in the Mishkan that shined as much as these. In fact, there's a whole story behind this copper, and this is why Hashem chose it. The sages tell us in the Midrash that when Moshe called to all the Jews and announced that anyone who wishes, and as they wish, should bring their donations for the holy construction of the Mishkan, the women came forth and brought their mirrors. Now obviously the mirrors weren't made out of silver or gold, it was made out of polished copper. And when Moshe looked at it, Moshe, it says, actually refused it, or he was about to refuse it. The word the Midrash says is, he was disgusted by it. Of course, not literally, but in the spiritual sense. And he felt like, what place does this have in the Holy Temple, which is of the service of Hashem, in such an elevated place? He felt like the mirrors, that their purpose and intent is for vanity, or as the Midrash calls it, for the Yetzer Hara, for the evil inclination, to entice a person's temptation, has no place in such a holy place. And Hashem said to him, no, I want you to take them. In fact, you see, as you see here, although it's mentioned all the way at the end, which seems to give the impression that it's of a lower standard, or of a lower importance, yet, what does Hashem say? Nothing can go forward. Nothing can even begin, can't even enter. A Kohen cannot even enter without first washing his hands from that particular thing. Why was it Hashem so excited and so desired this particular copper? Hashem says because it's these mirrors that created the armies of Hashem. Those children that were able to leave Egypt. Without these mirrors, there have not been Am Yisrael as you know it. What's the story behind it? Well, the sages tell us when the men working out in the fields, they were beaten. They were just absolutely exhausted. No desire to have any whatsoever family life. And it's the women who had the foresight to come and entice them and get them to make sure that there is a continuance to Am Yisrael. And Hashem said, these are very special for me. These mean the most to me. And therefore all the service in the temple will begin with the water that comes from this wash basin that was made from this copper. There's a very important lesson here. Psychologically, whenever we approach a matter, we typically, I guess most of us, would typically and instinctively divide what we consider to be the mundane and the holies. It's very difficult for us to really get used to the idea that our purpose is to take and lift up the mundane. And even so, as you see by Moshe, he was well aware of that. And he knew that we need to elevate the gold and the silver and everything and turn it into an abode for Hashem. But even he felt like this is already too low. This is beyond something that can be elevated. And the lesson over here is, and of course we need to always follow the code of Jewish law. We can't just pick and choose anything we like or anything we think that we can elevate. But of course within the confines and within the parameters of Jewish law, even those things which seem, at least initially on the surface, seem to be of the nature of vanity and something that really doesn't connect to holiness. But if we really dig a little deeper, we can find a redeeming quality in the thing itself, and through that find an opportunity, that hook with which to elevate it to an even higher level of Kedusha. And that's very important, especially when it comes to us personally. We all have parts of ourselves, of our beings, of our psychological beings, emotional beings, that may not be perfect. We may have our flaws. We may have our copper. We're not always gold. We're not always silver. We're not always bright and shining. And we may think to ourselves, what can that do? What positive can that serve? What purpose can that serve in the service of Hashem? And that is really the lesson here. That is not only less, actually, that needs to be used for the very beginning. That is your main goal, is to turn that around, to harness those quote-unquote weaknesses, that Yetzer Hara, harness it and use it for the service of Hashem. Have that contribute to set off, to set the tone, to ignite that spark, to get the combustion to do the service of Hashem. Shalom.